the way that we measure the rate of biological aging, so the rate that we're physically aging, not the numbers of, birthdays we've celebrated, but really the rate that we're aging, which can be very different from our chronological age. It can be much faster or it could be much slower. The way that we measure that is through DNA methylation. And that was an extraordinary thing. So that informs our story here in a really, really big way.
Dr. Kara Fitzgerald is engaged in award-winning clinical research on DNA methylation using diet and lifestyle interventions developed in her virtual and in-person functional medicine clinic. She's the author of Younger You, Reduce Your Bio Age and Live Longer, Better, a groundbreaking work detailing an 8-week study that resulted in a 3-year reversal of biological aging, and the step-by-step program that will help you live better and longer. She has since published a follow-up case series in Women, in which participants reduced their biological age by an average of over 4 years compared to baseline. Dr. Fitzgerald is also on the faculty of the Institute for Functional Medicine and is an IFM certified practitioner. She regularly lectures internationally and hosts the podcast New Frontiers in Functional Medicine. She received her doctorate in naturopathic medicine from the National University of Natural Medicine in Oregon, and she is in private practice in Sandy Hook, Connecticut. Welcome, Dr. Kara Fitzgerald.
Welcome to Take Back Your Health with Dr. Amy Myers. I am thrilled to have a very, very dear friend here, Dr. Kara Fitzgerald. So welcome. And today we're going to be talking all about methylation, which is, like we cannot live without. So I'm excited to chat with you. Before we get started, do you want to tell our listeners who are not familiar with you, just kind of how you got into, your naturopathic medicine, but also into functional medicine?
From the beginning of my career. I was a student when I started to follow Dr. Jeff Bland, the father of functional medicine. I was in university in the Pacific Northwest, and Jeff was lecturing routinely. And I was just dazzled by nutritional biochemistry, and there's a real underpinning in functional medicine to kind of tease out and understand mechanisms, and that sang to me. Honestly, if I hadn't found functional medicine, Dr. Bland, I ended up doing a postdoctorate position in laboratory science under the direction of another, well-regarded nutritional biochemist, Dr. Richard Lord. So Jeff Bland is a nutritional biochemist, Richard Lord is a nutritional biochemist, and I just steeped in this incredibly specialized, very inspirational training for me. And that forms sort of the underpinning of functional medicine. And then, of course, there's the clinical aspect, where we're bringing this, we're sort of translating the science to bring our patients the best and most effective and cutting edge medicine. And so I really steeped in that from the get-go. So what I was going to say is if I hadn't found Jeff and if I hadn't gotten into this laboratory, I'm sure that I would be a PhD at this point. I would have probably jumped careers and just gone into the science, but to have both together, the clinical and it's just heaven. So yeah. And that's how we met. Of course, you and I were palling around back when we were kind of, just sort of newbie into the functional medicine, but we met very early in our careers, I think, in functional medicine and we had our little tribe, many conferences, lots of fun conferences with you.
Yes, we go way back. And, I like to talk about the Journal Club group and the whole crew of which you are part of the Journal Club that were all just way smarter than me. And so, I really loved having that Journal Club. And as I've interviewed a number of people from Journal Club, I'm like, we need to do this again. So early in my career, when I didn't understand all the pathways or had questions, I had folks like yourself and many of the other people that I've interviewed that, were really knee deep in the research. And so it was always just so great to have these brilliant minds to be able to go to.
Really fun. And you were always there. You were always there. And when we were in real life, you always had chocolate. We followed you for the party. It's kind of funny. It's sweet. It's just not, I'm so glad that you're talking to people from the Journal Club. Yeah, we definitely need to resurrect it. We'll have a little taste of it at this IFM conference But
Yes.
yeah.
I was the social one, and now I'm a mom.
Right. We're both mom.
Now we're both bringing our adopted daughters to IFM, so indoctrinating them into the IFM world early and young to see what they absorb. Well, let's talk about methylation. I mean, for those that, are not familiar, can you just kind of start at the basics of what is methylation and, like, frankly, why should we really be caring about it?
Methylation. So it's just very simply a carbon and 3 hydrogens. It's just this ubiquitous molecule, in biology. This a carbon with 3 hydrogens. Maybe you remember it, folks, from science in high school. And you can put this carbon, the body can put this methyl group onto different molecules in the body to eliminate them or to change their actions. Like, basically, we have a methylation cycle where we're making this carbon and 3 hydrogens, and we're making them in pretty much every cell in the body. This methylation cycle is whirring through, making these methyl groups all of the time. And we're putting them on, we're taking them off, just all over. There's hundreds of biochemical reactions really happening all of the time involving adding a methyl group or taking one off. So we make our neurotransmitters using this. We detox, we eliminate it. So if you pump out a bunch of adrenaline, if you're in like a fight or flight, or if you're exercising and you're pumping out adrenaline, the way that you eliminate it is by, putting a methyl group on or eliminating a methyl group. And so dopamine, the big feel-good hormone, requires our ability to make these methylation. Estrogen, when we're eliminating estrogen from the body in the safest way, we need methyl donors. Other really important compounds that are essential for good brain health, like phosphatidylcholine, ethanolamine, and so forth. Muscles, like our muscle energy, relies on our ability to methylate, making melatonin to sleep. Just, it sort of goes on and on and on and on, all of these incredibly important roles that methylation does. And it's actually a nutrition dense process. So we need folate, we need B12, even DHA. So omega-3 fatty acids have a background role in helping methylation function efficiently. We need zinc, we need magnesium, we need potassium, B's. Other B vitamins. We need amino acids, that we get from protein to keep this cycle whirring. So it's very nutritionally dense, and we can hit trouble. In fact, many of us do, because this cycle is not operating optimally. Either there's inadequate intake of the nutrients. Maybe we have compromised absorption. Maybe we have higher demand. Or one of the areas that I know that you've talked about before is genetically we have an inability to kind of whir this cycle and go around and do the work it needs to be done as effectively as it could be. And then my area of research these days has been in DNA methylation, which influences what genes in the body are on and what genes are off. And this is the field of epigenetics, epi above, genetics the genes. And so our research has really focused on DNA methylation and, optimal DNA methylation patterns for health, and specifically for biological age, for basically the rate of how our bodies are aging and the rate at which are aging is right there in the heart of methylation via DNA methylation. So after that mouthful, let me just stop for a while and and
because you got a whole book, I have it right here. Younger You, we'll talk about that. I mean, you actually have studies, showing reversing biological age. So I know people are going to be super interested in that. But I mean, I guess of all sort of the mechanisms in the body, of which there are vast, what piqued your interest in methylation to begin with?
Well, I mean, being a functional medicine doc, we were thinking about it from the get-go. I mean, it's sort of like this biochemical process that most people don't think about. We think about oxygen because if you're not breathing, if you're not accessing oxygen molecules, you'll feel it immediately when you can't breathe, and you'll have to have it, or you'll suffer greatly and eventually, fairly short order die. But The same is true with methylation, but we don't feel it in the same way. Like we're using this methyl group as ubiquitously and in so many different processes. And I think, back in the lab, right when I graduated, actually, it's funny, even before I graduated, when I was doing my postdoctorate interview. So back then, it was my postdoc interview with our nutritional biochemist. He was talking about the methylation cycle. He was actually pop quizzing me. Richard Lord was on the methylation cycle and on this molecule called homocysteine. We think about homocysteine being elevated and its association with heart disease, but it's actually a really important molecule that sits in the heart of methylation as well and helps us make just all sorts of radically important compounds. And so here he was interviewing me, and my jaw was on the floor. I was both incredibly excited and terrible and so intimidated. And so that I guess you could say that my career started in methylation. And so in the laboratory, we were measuring it, and we were really looking at whether people were able to do it and what kind of nutrients they needed and some of the secondary molecules, whether they were making it. And then but it was later after, finishing that position and being in my own practice that I became specifically excited about DNA methylation.
And I'm over here smiling because I was just reminded of really how I think we met was you working in the lab and me ordering a lot of tests from the lab. And, a lot of these results were looking at how well people methylated and what they were missing and what they needed. And early on in my practice, I would call and you could get a consult with one of the scientists at the lab. And of course, doing hundreds of these, I knew, and it was you and Cass were the two that were so knowledgeable. I would always be like, I'd like a Dr. Fitzgerald, please, because I would get some people and I was like, I'm not really sure what this person's saying, but you always had a great way of breaking it down. So I was just kind of reminded of I remember calling and you were always so good at explaining all of it and helping me understand, what somebody was missing.
It was a nice feature of the lab, and they didn't put time constraints. Like I could, as long as much time as you had, I had, and we.
And I was always a curious person with lots of questions because, of course, I'm a poor methylator, and so even though I was calling about this other patient's test, I was sort of extrapolating. Cool. How was this, affecting me and whatnot. So, I think we realized, by doing a lot of these tests that chronic diseases were, as a result of, this not being able to methylate properly. And as you mentioned, that's either having a greater need, having certain genetics that you're just not a good methylator, not having, the inputs that you need. So let's talk about epigenetics and methylation.
I started to read the papers on epigenetics. It's kind of funny because at first I was a little bit resistant. They were coming in my box. I just get a ton of content from different labs and different publications in my box. And I want to say like maybe 2013, 2014, 2015, more and more of these papers in epigenetics and DNA methylation were dumping in. And I was like, a little resistant to really diving into the world of epigenetics. And sometimes I reflect back on that and think that, it was a harbinger of things to come. And maybe I was like, oh my God, this is, at some part of me knew that my life would be completely shaken upside down with the entry into thinking about epigenetics. Who knows? But I started to really dive into them, Amy, with an eye towards what are we doing in functional medicine? Are we doing this right? Now we can actually, so when you and I first started, when we were dialoguing at the lab, we were not able to look at DNA methylation and gene expression with the kind of clarity that we came to be able to, and now we can. So it was a very new science. And the papers that were rolling off initially were papers around cancer. And the tumor microenvironment very efficiently hijacks DNA methylation from us. So the tumor microenvironment will go in there and turn genes on and turn genes off by manipulating methylation to its own nefarious ends. And that stopped me in my tracks. In fact, so efficiently and reproducibly and consistently does cancer take over DNA methylation that there are now lab tests, like extraordinary lab tests to measure, to identify cancers, in their very earliest iteration by looking at DNA methylation patterns. There's some very incredible, cool technology out there. So when I was reading it back in the day, my thinking was there are probably some times when we need to be mindful and pull back on how much we're pushing methylation. If there's a pre-cancer or if there's an active cancer, we want to be more nuanced around it. I started to have all of these questions. And, as you know, in my clinic, we had a teaching clinic. We had a teaching clinic for nutritionists, and we also invited physicians in to track with us in rounds. So and in addition to the journal club. So we've always had this sort of education-rich center at my clinic. And I was talking to our nutrition director, Romilly Hodgins, at the time, just really sort of out loud dialogue. And she and I were chatting this back and forth. And what we realized was that a diet and lifestyle program designed to specifically sweet talk DNA methylation with an eye towards cancer, but also seeing that wonky gene expression, that wonky DNA methylation, to use the scientific term, is underpinning everything, all the chronic diseases, as you mentioned earlier. And so we started to see that we could build brick by brick a dietary pattern, a dietary program that would, in our best read on the scientific literature, optimize DNA methylation. And we can talk about those components in a second. Mm-hmm. And we also saw that exercise, that sleep, that dealing with our stress, that these other lifestyle components that we know are so important, we often don't know why, were as essential to optimizing DNA methylation and methylation more broadly. And so we built this program as a way of, doing this without needing to rely on vitamins. Although, let me say that, of course, we need to be using vitamins and we need to be leaning on those in certain times. But we wanted this foundational dietary pattern. And so we built this program. We released it to you guys, to our colleagues in Journal Club, and we released it as a white paper. That was 2016. We were given a grant to study it. And that happened, that we launched that in early 2018. And the findings of the study form the book. But let me just stop there to see if you've got any thoughts or questions.
Yeah, I mean, I just remember early on us having those questions, right? Because people like myself with COMT SNPs and MTHFR SNPs, taking really high dose, pre-methylated B vitamins. And I remember those questions early on, like, is it possible to have too much? Could this be pushing certain pathways, pathologically? Yeah. So it sounds like, research came out since then stating that, like, yes, it can. Yeah. So, I mean, I think people are probably really interested in, in your program and what you did, because you do have the research to back it.
The way that we measure the rate of the biological aging, so the rate that we're physically aging, not the numbers of birthdays we've celebrated, but really the rate that we're aging, which can be very different from our chronological age. It can be much faster or it could be much slower. The way that we measure that is through DNA methylation. And that was an extraordinary thing. So that informs our story here in a really, really big way. When we started...
Can I pause? Sorry, real quick. And so is there a commercial test that people are able to do?
Yes,
and if so, which one do you recommend?
Yeah.
If people are interested in
100%
checking.
So so we're using a laboratory called True Diagnostic routinely these days. Back when we were doing our research, it was not available clinically. You couldn't get these. Now you can. So True Diagnostic is who we're using. They've got a lot of different what we call them biological age clocks, but different DNA methylation clocks. The one that we're using in our research now is called the pace of aging, and this measures the rate of aging. It doesn't give you a biological age, but it'll give you your rate of aging. If you're aging at a level at 1, you're consistent with your chronological age, but you can be aging much lower than 1. So that means you're aging more slowly. You can also be aging faster. We offer that just for anybody who wants a little hand holding, because the journey can be a little bit overwhelming. In my clinic, we have a package where you can get this test plus a consultation with one of our nutritionists who are involved in our research. So to say they're smart is sort of the understatement. And we priced it super, super low. So people can just go and get this done and then talk to a nutritionist about whatever their questions are. And we'll tell them, do this, this, and this based on these results. We actually have them do a biological age quiz that we created and this test. And then they meet with a nutritionist and they get a sweet little take-home package of actionable items. And we looked at...
And then I assume they can retest after an 8-week period and whatnot.
Yeah.
Well, at the end, we'll mention your website and everything, but if you want to mention it now as well so people know where to go.
It's just Dr. Kara Fitzgerald, Dr. Kara, Kara, Fitzgerald.com. And they'll see they'll see a link to, I think it says how old are you really or something. You click on that link and it'll take you over to accessing the package. Yeah, it's pretty easy. It's awesome. And we actually did a little study that hopefully we'll publish on. We were able to show that the biological age quiz that we'll have you take that's in that book correlates significantly with the DNA methylation test that you'll take. So it's nice to see that they're related, that, we're putting we're demonstrating that quiz we created is actually, a good quiz.
Pretty reliable. Right. Okay.
So we started to do this. Our original thinking was that we would see changes to DNA methylation favorable, that were signals of health, less inflammation, better metabolism, and so forth. But what was really extraordinary was during the time of running our study, the first human study to show that biological age reversal was a thing, that this could actually happen, came out. So our study was underway. The first clinical trial to demonstrate it could happen in humans came out. Before that, this was 2019. Before that, they didn't think biological age reversal in humans was possible. So it's really new science that we can slow or even reverse possibly the rate of aging. It's very new science.
And what were they using in that study? Because I know your program is fully a nutritional dietary program.
Yeah. So these guys, the first study to demonstrate bioage reversal was a year-long intervention. They used growth hormone injections. They used metformin. They used DHEA. I think they had vitamin D and zinc on board as well. Very
something
different.
that you're going to have to go get a prescription for, maybe is somewhat controversial because you're dealing with growth hormone, which also there's some controversy. Same thing with the methylation. Can you get too much and sort of push somebody into a pathological process?
Yes.
So
that's right.
And a year long, whereas your study is purely nutritional. And I think you saw results at 8 weeks.
I know. That's right. Yeah, that's right. So we were pretty excited that when this study came out, we were excited to see that they showed it in humans. And so we were excited to actually unpack that because we were using the same tools that they were using. And so, we were obviously just floored that we demonstrated in 8 weeks using a diet and lifestyle intervention that you could actually see pretty profound bioage reversal results in our study. And we had a control group, so we compared it to the control group.
And what was the average age reversal?
Over 3 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
And did it continue going down, or was there a period where it sort of plateaued out?
Well, it was only 8 weeks time. And so within that, we showed, at baseline, as compared to baseline after that 8 week time period, it was 3.23 years. We didn't continue to measure them. I mean, these are all awesome questions. And, had we known, but we were literally study number 3 in the world. We were the first study with a control group, and the first diet and lifestyle intervention. Like, we were a lot of firsts. I mean, it was like a pinch me. Am I actually alive? Like, it was just one of those incredible golden moments of my career, just the extraordinary highlight of my career. And just really going back to our functional medicine roots, our journal club, just being surrounded by smart people, being able to ask really good questions, and to just think them through and to form hypotheses and to build a program around, our best thinking, and then to actually have it funded. I mean, it's just like my wildest possible dreams come true. And then, once we saw what we had done, of course, we had a lot of attention. Amazing. I mean, the paper, they track research studies and the influence that they have. And our paper is, at the very top, like 99th percentile of, interest, like the kind of attention that it received. We have two, and then we did a follow-up study that's really almost as, significant in terms of the attention that it received. And so from that, the book came. It was logical to us, like, why not make this available to everybody? And so that, that's what we did after that. And yeah, it's been very career defining, career changing for me, and just, really extraordinary, and kind of born out of, having Jeff as our mentor and Richard Lord and our team, and, the thinking that we were able to do, and, just being surrounded by smart people who are motivated and interested and really want to make life better, really want to just create a better medicine.
Well, without, spoiling the book, can you kind of walk us through
100%.
the basic tenets of the program?
Well, yeah. So here's a big shift people can start to take. We can, food is information, and, you're giving your body the information that it needs that's going to promote growth or not. And food, we call every forkful of our program is packed full of these compounds we call epinutrients. These epinutrients, help determine what genes are on and what genes aren't. And so you want every single forkful to be packed with these epinutrients, guiding the highest expression of ourselves, slowing our rate of aging, allowing us to be here long, to be here healthy, et cetera, et cetera. So what are epinutrients? They are foods that you're very familiar with. They're your leafy greens. They're your, the beautiful, mushrooms. They're the colorful, cruciferous. So lots of veg. Beets are an epinutrient superfood. Eggs, if you can do eggs have a compound called choline that is essential for good DNA methylation, or DNA methylation, but essential more broadly for methylation. And it's hard for many of us to make. And it's this incredibly important brain food as well. So eggs are epinutrients, salmon, other fatty, clean source fish, green tea, turmeric, luteolin, rosmarinic acid, and rosemary. There's hundreds of these epinutrients that have some evidence behind them as being able to kind of sweet talk gene expression. So we just harvested all the literature around that and created a program. And so the dietary pattern is something that people won't find. People who are familiar with high plant, but there's definitely animal. Although we did create a vegan and vegetarian version in the book for people who don't eat animal protein. We do consider animal protein to be beneficial. If people are willing to take liver capsules or eat liver, it's a multivitamin in a food matrix. So all of these things are in the dietary pattern. It's low glycemic, it's lower carb, or simple carb leaning. It's hypoallergenic, it's anti-inflammatory. So it's like an important dietary pattern that I think will be familiar to a lot of people, with this one sort of cool caveat is that every food is going to help optimize gene expression.
And then do you combine that with anything? Already you say it's a lower carb, but are you getting people into ketosis? Are you doing any intermittent fasting? Are there any other sort of parameters around it? Any, caloric restriction or calorie, don't exceed X number of calories? Or is it really, who's going to overeat kale?
That's funny. Our participants lost significant weight. So the people in the study group as compared to the control lost significant weight. We've got a paper in peer review right now where we've isolated the nutrients associated with bioage reversal most strongly in our dietary pattern. So we'll circle back to that, but we also talk about the weight loss. So to answer your question, we do a very gentle time restricted structure. So we wanted this to be, we used this with our patients. So we wanted this to be very doable not only for our patients, but for a broad population, for anyone. So the we make it as doable. We pull the branch down as much as we can. The time restricted structure is only 12 hours on, 12 hours off. So it's really easy. Now, we do in clinical practice tighten that up for people when it's appropriate. So in any functional medicine practice, of course, you're individualizing it a lot. We can talk a little bit about that. And I cover a little bit about that in the book. But, more broadly, it's just 12 hours on, 12 hours off. It's a little bit keto leaning. We suspect that our participants were in ketosis because they burned a lot of triglycerides. We looked at their triglycerides, and their triglycerides dropped significantly, which is consistent with, burning fat, which produces ketones as an off. As a byproduct. So we think that probably they were in, a degree of ketosis with the intervention. There's no caloric restriction. There's a set of targets that are featured in the book. There's certain nutrients we want people to ingest daily and then some weekly. And they can consume beyond that appropriate foods as they need to. We have created sort of calorically restricted models for different scenarios, but we haven't researched those. So we have lots of variations of the intervention that we use in clinical practice and elsewhere. We just haven't had the opportunity to research them. So the core program that's covered in Younger You is what we published on now twice.
And now, when you were doing your study, did you get any SNP testing, looking for methylation issues?
We did, in fact, do SNP testing, and there's a suggestion, and this is something that we'll need to follow up with, but there's a suggestion that those with MTHFR, any variety of the two main MTHFR mutations, so 677 or 1298, heterozygous or homozygous, appeared to be aging at an accelerated rate. So we have this as a exploratory thread, and they appeared to reverse bioage with the intervention more profoundly than those without, those with the wild type. This is an interesting finding that we need to follow up on. Because there's at least one other study suggesting that in women. So women with MTHFR in this other study, I think it was the 677 variant only, were aging at accelerated rate. But when they took B vitamins, so they didn't use dietary intervention like ours, but when they took B vitamins, they slowed things down. So there's definitely a thread out there that this incredibly common mutation that wonks out methylation could lead to an accelerated aging pattern, but that is very responsive to, using B vitamins or using the dietary pattern that we use. So yeah, super good question.
Yeah. So two comments that I have on that. Of course, we would see, I'm sure you did too, in your population, people who already had, in my case, lots of autoimmune conditions. And I mean, it was rare that I had a patient that didn't have at least one mutation, if not two, probably again, leading to this, earlier, more rapid decline in health and age. But did you need to add any additional supplements to those people in your study, or were they able to do this just through dietary methods?
We did not. By design, we did not use supplements. So let me just say that. And what's extraordinary about it is, we changed DNA methylation patterns to configured for a more useful phenotype. We made, we changed them without using a supplement. And Amy, we increased circulating folate. We increased circulating methylfolate in our study participants significantly as compared to control. So we were able to do it with this very pointed diet and lifestyle program. We knew we could in clinical practice because we had a few years out before we launched our research study kicking the tires of our dietary intervention. I mean, you remember in your practice, of course, you've got these people who can't handle B vitamins at all. And you're just like, how do I do this? Do I do them as injections? Do I use topicals? I mean, we were always having to think outside the box in clinical practice for people who were very, very sensitive. And so we had plenty of opportunities to use this dietary pattern in practice. And we could see that when people followed it, their homocysteine dropped, the markers of methylation all improved the ones that we had available. We didn't at that time have clinical ability in clinical practice to get DNA methylation testing like we can now. Now we can, look at that as well. So without supplements, but let me just circle back and say we did use we gave people a probiotic and we gave people a greens powder. So we used those two things in our intervention because those polyphenol compounds, in the book, we call them methylation adaptogens. They sort of help sweet talk methylation, curcumin, again, luteolin, rosmarinic acid, resveratrol, all of these beautiful green tea, and on and on. In fact, there's a nutrient appendix in the end of the book. There's a 30-page epinutrient appendix. There are a lot of rockstar nutrients, and we wanted people to just get these all-important polyphenols. So we gave them a greens powder, and then we gave them a probiotic. The probiotic had some evidence behind it as potentially supporting a microbiome that could synthesize folate. A healthy microbiome can basically make a multivitamin. And so we just wanted to stoke that.
Right.
And we did succeed in increasing circulating methylfolate without providing any methylated B vitamins.
What other measurements were you taking? You've briefly mentioned homocysteine. You mentioned triglycerides.
Yep.
Were there other baseline tests that you were sort of checking along the way?
We looked at a handful of a modest SNP panel specific for methylation. And as I said, we saw a hint towards MTHFR being associated with accelerated aging and then decelerated aging. What else did we do? Yeah, we did a modest, very basic lipid panel. I mean, all of these, let me just say, because people will armchair quarterback with me and be like, you should have done this and this and this. It was a solid six-figure study. It was incredibly expensive. So you have to think about what you're adding. At the time, the DNA methylation tests were well over $1,000 a piece, and we ran them at 3 different time points. So they're just so expensive. And then we hired a clinical research center to run the study. So we needed to be modest. So we had a very basic lipid panel, no sophisticated, lipid metabolites that we like. We did homocysteine, we did S-adenosine methionine. So we did a methylation panel and a folate vitamin panel. So those are actually 2 pretty cool additional panels that we got through doctors' data. We did a basic chemistry. So we had we got blood sugar and we had an A1C. So what we showed in our participants was a significant drop in triglycerides, a bump up in methylated folate, a drop in LDL. We did not show any a significant change to blood sugar or homocysteine or A1C. And I should say that in part, this is because we recruited a healthy population. There's 2 interesting points here. One, we only recruited healthy people into this study, healthy men. These guys were healthy, no diabetics, no pre-diabetics, et cetera, et cetera. They weren't on medication. It took us a while to recruit to find healthy people right now, right? It took us.
That's so sad.
Yeah, I know it is sad. It did. It took us a while. It took us like a year to run an 8-week study for that reason, actually. So we didn't expect to see those things change. It's interesting to me that the key methylation marker that we use in practice, homocysteine, we didn't see nudge at all, but we saw, dramatic changes to DNA methylation. So
have you thought about why that is or what that?
Well, I think it's because
lack of correlation.
Well, we also didn't see a net increase in DNA methylation in our participants. So I have a couple thoughts. One is these guys weren't coming to us with hyperhomocystinemia. Because again, they were healthy. So we're not expecting to see radical shifts there. We did fine tune it. We dropped LDL, we dropped triglycerides. We did fine tune some stuff. Participants lost a significant amount of weight as compared to controls. So we were making them healthier. But there's this interesting idea that I think is really kind of cool. It's kind of badass. It's basically like we went in and we rearranged DNA methylation. We rearranged it. We didn't net increase it. We didn't push it forward. We moved it around towards something healthier and more youthful. So that's what appears to have happened.
we all talk about in functional medicine, exercise, looking at your toxic burden, sleep, stress, all of these things. Was there anything else, or was this purely, dietary intervention, or were you, having them think or work on any of these other aspects as well?
We wanted people to sleep well. You can't make them sleep well, but we had sleep hygiene tips. So I think fundamentally a reason that our program was successful is because we required the study participants to meet with one of our nutritionists on a weekly basis. So they had that ongoing touch point to make sure they were dialed in. I mean, nutrition research is notoriously meek because people are just sort of doing food recalls and stuff like that. There's not a lot of rigor to, really following that people are following, doing the program. But we had them actually come into the research center frequently and track what they were eating. We had them meet with our nutritionists, and it made a difference. So within the nutrition, when they met with the nutritionist, the nutritionists would go not just through the diet, but make sure they were doing the lifestyle pieces. And if they would brainstorm with them with sleep hygiene tips and just, encourage them to get adequate sleep. Sleep is a methylation elixir, big time. I mean, if you're not sleeping well, you are aging at an accelerated rate. Your risk for all the chronic diseases increases, exponentially. So sleep is incredibly important. And we see sleep deprivation is really damaging DNA methylation patterns towards something pushing age forward, but also just, increasing our risk of dementia and just, all sorts of negative fallout. So we wanted people to sleep. Exercise rearranges DNA methylation as important and potent as kale. Like if you're not going to eat your kale, you got to get on your bike. I mean, exercise is this amazing vegetable, basically. It's so funny. It's such a methylation superstar. So exercise needed to be an important component, but not crazy exercise. So again, we want people to be able to, we want anyone to be able to do this. And so it was 30 minutes, the minimum was 30 minutes, 5 days a week, doing whatever the heck it is that you want to do, as long as your perceived exertion is between 60 and 80%. So 60, You can still talk. Maybe you're sweating a little bit. It could be a walk. 80%, you're sweating a little bit more. You can still talk, but now you're breathing a little bit heavy. And that's it. So research says your perception of 60 to 80% is actually consistent with a measurable 60 to 80% metric, if we had actually, used tracking tools. So that was it. A minimum of 30 minutes, 5 days a week at 60 to 80%. Now, of course, those people who are trained are going to get more benefit going in more aggressively. And we blogged about that recently, sort of layering in a higher protein approach with our dietary pattern to coordinate with resistance training and muscle building. Like we're definitely thinking about these sort of younger you 2.0 programs. But in our foundational study, which we wanted to be broadly adoptable, that was the exercise prescription. There is evidence when people push it too far. When we look at athletes, like extremely highly trained athletes, in some cases, there can be a pro-aging phenomena that happens. And anybody who's, been a competitive athlete or, who's overtrained knows the perils of that fallout. I mean, I used to get, when I competed when I was in university, I would get sinusitis at the end of every season. Like I would completely shut my immune system down and get sick. And I loved competing. I wouldn't trade it, but, there's overtraining as well. So yes, intensity can be turned up according to where you're at. And that's hugely important, and it needs to be rationally done. The final lifestyle piece that we added in was meditation. I think a big aha for me was to see how massively impactful stress is on biological aging. The clock that we used in our original cohort, in our original study, actually has about a 25% of it is influenced directly by glucocorticoid. So cortisol. So the stress response will change 25% of the clock. And there's no other component as impactful. Wow. I mean, I know. I know, it's extraordinary to me. So it just I had this aha, of stress being like gasoline on the fire of aging, like one of the most, and maybe ultimately we'll learn that it's the biggest, it's the most profound influence on aging, even more than diet. Like if you were a Zen Buddhist monk, maybe you can get away with eating at McDonald's. No, right. You can't hear that from me.
You probably can, definitely.
So we had people meditate twice a day. We had them do a very basic breathing practice to elicit the relaxation response. And that was a core part of our program as well.
And for how long?
So it was a minimum of 10 minutes twice daily.
You've written this book. You are the key researcher on all of this. So what does Dr. Kara Fitzgerald do every day? And is there a day that if you are following your own program that you don't?
I meet our exercise prescription and then some. That's just easy and incredible and important for me and my mental health. So the dietary targets, I do a good job. I'm not perfect right now. I'll dial it in. In fact, we're running groups, and so I'm going to jump in and I'll be right in the intensive program with everybody. I did it all during the process of writing the book. The lead up to that, the intensive dietary pattern. There's two programs in the book. There's the intensive, and that's exactly what we did in our research. And then there's what we call the everyday that loosens up a little bit. So there's no alcohol during that 8-week time. But then, if you want a glass of wine or some vodka or whatever, some of the cleaner alcohols, you can do that. And, you can do a little bit of dairy if you don't react, if you want, you do a little bit of grain, et cetera. But the intensive dietary pattern actually suits my constitution really, really well. For many years, I had the targets right up on my fridge, and I would hit them. I don't have the targets on my fridge right now, but I could use it. And so, to your point, we'll be doing a group up here in the not so distant future. We have one running right now, but there's another one that I'll just jump in and make sure that I'm paying attention to my targets and I'm actually getting, the 7 to 9 cups of veggies per day. Right now, I eyeball it. I do pretty well with it just because it's a comfortable dietary pattern for me. I take my liver. I don't do it I don't eat it in real life. I don't even know how to cook it.
I can't
take
either.
The capsules.
Me either. Me too. Yeah, but I think it's good that people, hear that you're human. It's I talk about, and I think it's somewhat equivalent in the, autoimmune solution about the autoimmune spectrum. And as you're high up on the spectrum, having symptoms, you really got to be, really
double down,
dialed in and doubled down. And, as your markers are going down and whatnot, that you can expand a little. So it sounds very similar. Now, what about you have a 6-year-old, right? Is Isabella 6 now? So how is she? Is she, eating these, 8? And if you tell me she is, I'm gonna,
come crawl through the computer and just
get some recipes from you because
it's hard, right?
Once Elle started school, it's so hard. I mean, she had broccoli at every meal practically,
especially in Mexico. Let me tell you.
Yeah. Okay. But so what's Isabella doing?
Well, let me say it's really funny. I think parenting is sort of the most humbling experience. You can think you've got something down and you will learn. As soon as you think you have it down, know that you will be upended. So Isabella ate perfectly, right? When I had said Isabella ate perfectly. She ate broccoli rabe, and she loved broccoli rabe.
Same thing. Elle loved it. Yeah. Literally, wanted broccoli.
Yeah.
Can't get it in the child right now.
No.
Go ahead.
So, I'm with you.
So you're making two different meals?
Funny. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah, all the time.
Yeah.
Oh God, that's hysterical. I mean, I remember my sister-in-law just, Kara, if you post another picture of your kid eating salmon and broccoli rabe and blueberries, I'm just don't. And it was really funny because she was struggling with her kids at the time. And it was super funny because I was like, oh, I got this. My kid eats so great.
Yeah,
and I don't
too.
have it. I don't have it, folks.
I mean, it's like once they start school and they see the other kids, and it's like, oh, they had popcorn, they had pretzels.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, you didn't even know what that stuff was. You know?
Yeah. I mean, fortunately, you just have to find your entry point. Isabella's now at 6, Isabella is pretty bribable, and so I like to say to her that, the gateway to activity X or food Y is through that vegetable, that plate of veggies. And I find if I start her, I do courses with her. That's the tip that's worked right now for my kid is.
What do you mean courses?
Well, I start with her veggies.
Oh, like a course.
I just start with,
I got it.
Yeah, she eats her veg. So she's starving and she starts with veggies while I'm cooking the rest of it. And so I just dribble out according to what I want her to eat. And then, we negotiate like how much she's eating. I mean, we'll go right down to the leaves, so the spinach, because she actually likes raw spinach, amazingly enough. And she likes salad. I can pull out elements of a big salad that she'll chow down. But we will negotiate piece by piece sometimes, which is hysterical. It's absolutely hysterical. But so, we're in the real world over here, folks.
Yep. No, I mean, summertime's really good for us because I have a big garden and we make salads, and Elle loves to go out and, pick the vegetables. And there's, I guess, just something, very different about it. But
Isabella,
the big salad. Yeah. But, right now we're dealing with a little candida with her, and, she wants this, it doesn't matter, a little journal. And I'm like, well, when we've gotten through 30 days of, it's like mixing the probiotics with the Leaky Gut Revive with the, I'm like, you can have that journal at the end of 30 days after you've done all these things.
You do. Yeah, that's it. I know. It's like you just become a real like a good negotiator. I mean, we can be doing hostage negotiations, moms, parents.
Before we part, I like to just ask all guests 3 things that our listeners can do today to start to take back their health.
I would say that first of all, you're probably already doing a lot right. I think that's one of the coolest things that you're probably doing a lot right. And can you harness some of those and lean on them? In the nutrient appendix, 30 pages, I will ask the most sort of anxious, scared person to change their diet to go in there with a highlighter and highlight what they're already eating. That's
a great idea.
Yeah, it's easy. Yeah. And you can be validated that you're already consuming epinutrients, and then you can turn the volume up on those. So I would say every forkful matters. Every forkful is an opportunity, an extraordinary opportunity. Move your body, get enough sleep, pay attention to de-stressing. I'm already over my 3 things. And the one other final thing that I want to say, Amy, and it'll be fun to get to see you because this is a part of this final thing I'm going to say, you and all of our buddies, like Todd's going to be there. I mean, we're going to see so many people. Community and connection. We couldn't study community and connection. I like to joke about, the control group would be over here, no hugs, no PFAL. And then our study group would have, lavish connection and attention. But, that community, that connection, the love, who and whatever our families look like, our people, all of that, our pets is just elixir on optimal gene expression and longevity by a variety of measurements. So that's a huge thing. So even if you just hug your humans today or hug your pets and just get some of that love right there, that is probably, one of the absolute best things we could do.
So that just, of course, stimulated another question for me, which is, did you do anything? Did you create a community with the gentlemen that were,
that's a great question.
Or they left to their own communities?
So we invited people to a Facebook. I mean, it's all very controlled by IRB, and our participants had the option to jump in and join us. And a handful of them did. It was fabulous for a while. Remember, it was a year long. It took us a year to do it. So people who started way at the beginning, and then at the end of the study, after we, crunched and published, they're invited back. We didn't have all the
Oh, so
participants
people
come
weren't
back in.
going through the 8 weeks altogether. You were getting people doing 8 weeks, and they might have been done, and then you found some other healthy
rolling.
volunteers, and they got it. Okay.
Yeah, we had to move into we had to move into a rolling structure. Originally, we didn't want to do that, but it was just, as your earlier point, it took us a while to recruit a full cohort of healthy individuals. It took a while.
And how many people did you have in the study?
We had 42 total. We had in the end we had 18 finish the intervention, and I think we had 20 in the control. So I think we had 38 finish.
All right. Well, if anybody is interested in the very specific 8-week program, you can pick up a copy of Younger You. I imagine, Amazon, anywhere books are sold.
Super cheap on Amazon.
So proud of you.
Actually.
And also, look at thick. Don't be overwhelmed. But
yeah, that's right.
Go start
Kara
at the
is
nutrient.
known for the research. She's known for the research. So
But just go to the
we
nutrient.
knew it would be a big book.
Yeah, that's right. I know, isn't it funny? And they told me, you don't need to put every thought in there. And then, every thought's in there, at least circa up to that publication date. But just go to the nutrient appendix. If you're overwhelmed, flip to the back, start there. It's so cool. It's just really one of my favorite parts, and it's easy.
And again, if you want to remind people where they can find you.
Yeah, drkarafitzgerald.com, DRKARA Fitzgerald.com. I'm on Instagram, Dr. Kara Fitzgerald, Twitter, Dr. Kara Fitzgerald. Where else? Facebook, which I think might be Kara Fitzgerald ND. I don't really remember, but if you get over to Instagram, you'll find me elsewhere. We've got newsletters, podcasts. There's webinars if you're a professional. Some of it is more towards professionals, but there's plenty of content over there, especially on social, for you guys. If you want to get your BioAge and do the BioAge quiz is free on the site. You can add in the BioAge test if you want to and meet with one of our nutritionists. Those are really priced affordably. But the quiz itself, you can just hop over to our website and find it.
Is that in the book as well?
It's in the book.
The quiz?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Well, it was so great to see you. I look forward to seeing you in just a couple weeks. Thanks so much for joining me. It was great to catch up.
Yeah, big hug.
Awesome.
I want to thank this week's guests for sharing their time and knowledge, and thank you for listening. To read the full show notes for each episode, which include a summary, timestamp, quotes, and any resources mentioned, please visit amymyersmd.com/podcast. Lastly, if you've enjoyed this episode, I'd love if you would leave a rating and a review on Apple or Spotify, and we'll select a few to read out loud in a future episode. Tune in next week to hear from another inspiring guest as we help you take back your health.